Hello and welcome to another episode of the B2B Leadership Podcast. My name is Nils Vinja, and today I'm going to be talking about what is an elite leader. The first thing I want to do is look at the definition of the word elite. And according to the dictionary, elite means a select group that is superior in terms of ability or qualities to the rest of a group or society. So elite groups separate themselves from everybody else, and these elite groups exist in every different part of life today, in society, in work, in leadership, in teams, in the military. Right? Elite is always the small select group that is superior in terms of ability and qualities. My wife and I have been watching the show SEAL Team for a little while now, and I find it really fascinating because it follows a team called Bravo Team of Navy SEALs who get called in to go into some of the most incredibly intense environments to protect American interests and to rescue Americans, and just the storylines are absolutely fascinating. But what's really interesting and what I love about the show is just how different the SEAL teams approach things versus everybody else in the military. And SEALs are part of the Navy, so they contrast that with the rest of the Navy a lot of times. And if you've ever heard of the SEALs teams, you know that it's a very, very select group of people that get to qualify to be a Navy SEAL. And they have a training program called BUDS, which if you've never seen it, it's absolutely fascinating. There's some documentaries on it. But they put candidates through an intense experience because they know that only the hardest and only the most psychologically and mentally and physically strong people are worthy of being a Navy SEAL. And so if we look at the progression of a candidate through this incredible training experience and then ultimately ending up as what they call a tier 1 operator. And there's even variations of levels within the Navy SEALs. So not all Navy SEAls are equal. And this Bravo team that the SEAL team show follows is the elite of the elite. And it's fascinating. And Jason, the head of Bravo team, they call him Bravo 1. Likes to say there was a new member that joined the team, and he's like, well, this is, we're like all the other SEAL teams, but we get the best ops. And what he's saying is that they call us in to go to the most extreme situations. We are the best of the best. And Jason is always looking for an edge. He's always pushing his team. He's always pushing himself. Now, to a fault at times, yes, but the key principle remains that he has been a tier 1 operator in the show for nearly 20 years is the storyline. And he's been able to do that because he's always looked for new ways to improve his performance and improve his team's performance. And I love that sentiment. And I'm just fascinated by the fact of being able to watch somebody like that who takes so much pride in just ownership of their career and their role as a leader of a team. I think it's just absolutely wonderful. So that's why the show keeps us coming back. Now, I'm going to draw some parallels to the SEAL team show and leadership because they're an awful lot. They're very similar. Right? The training regimen that SEALs go through is intense. And the training regimen that you as a leader should go through should be intense. It should be designed to get you from where you are to develop a highly specialized set of skills that make you elite, that help you stand apart from everybody else, because there's a lot of leaders in the B2B space. Every business has people who are in people leadership positions. And even those who are in individual contributor level positions, they can be considered leaders as well, not just referring to only people who manage others. But the key thing here is that there is a training component. And the military is a really great example of how continuous training is the bar. That you don't just get into various branches of the military and go through basic training and then that's it. There are always courses and classes and things. And if you watch any shows related to the military, you'll hear stories about these, or you'll see them going to these specific, highly specialized trainings to continue to improve their skill set. So from a leadership perspective, you should always be thinking about what's the next course or skill set that I can acquire that's going to add more value to me and help me add more value to my team and to my customers and to my company. And if you're not thinking like that, well, that's step number one. And elite leaders are always looking for an edge. They're always looking for how to improve themselves. And psychology plays a big part. Now I'm going to walk through the definition of what I consider to be an elite leader through my 4 pillars of leadership. These are leading yourself, leading others, leading with communication, and leading with metrics. So let's start with leading yourself. So in the leading yourself area, and the reason I focus on this structure is because leadership is a giant, vast area. So before we get into it, I just want you to know that there are a lot of things that you could focus on from a leadership perspective. And the key is not to focus on a lot of things at once, is to focus on one thing at once and develop that skill set. Right? Just like the Navy SEALs, they talk about going to sniper school. There's a school that teaches people just how to be snipers. That's the only thing they do. And only the people who are going to be going into some sniper field typically end up there. Right? And you never know as a SEAL when that skill set's going to be incredibly important. So they use the opportunity when they're not on missions to go to various training programs to acquire the new skill set that's going to support them in their next mission. So back to the leading yourself pillar. So first up, elite leaders are the CEOs of their career. They have made the decision to be the ones who are in control of everything that they do from a career standpoint, but also from a learning and development standpoint as well. You see, when you're not a CEO of your career, what that means is that your company or your boss or perhaps your HR org, the circumstances of your environment are going to determine how far and how high you can go. And quite frankly, that's okay. If you're fine with that, I am not going to pass any judgment, but that is not going to get you into an elite category. The elite leaders have taken control, have said 100%, I am the CEO of my career. I am in charge. I am responsible for making the decisions of what is going to be most important for me to focus on now to set me up for future success, and I am in control. I will leverage my organization and my manager and my HR team to help me fulfill my career goals, but they're mine. Right? There's a very big difference between this, and that is the starting point of what is there between the average and the elite. Now, the second piece kind of dovetails on this, but it's all about the mindset. Elite leaders know that leadership is a long-term game. And one of the most important things is not to focus and worry so much about what's happening today and next week and next month, but to look 1, 3, 5, and 10 years down the line. You don't have to know exactly what you're doing at all those times, but you got to have a long-term view. And that's why acquiring the right training and skill sets is going to set you up for future success. It might not be immediately applicable, or it might be immediately applicable, but it's something that is going to serve you for many, many years in the future. The language that elite leaders use is different from everybody else. They do not accept vagueness. And in our professional world today, there is a ton of vagueness in the way people speak. They say things like, oh, you're not strategic, or our sales are down, you need to fix it. They say generic platitudes, cliches, things that just don't mean anything. Now, elite leaders know that they have to eliminate the vagueness and ultimately get to a place where they can communicate clearly so people can understand, and they say things that do not position them as the hero. Right? They're not the one pointing out the problem and saying it's your job. My job's to point it out and your job's to fix it. They are right there partnering with their teams every step of the way and setting the vision for the future. So the language they use is dramatically different and much, much more specific than the rest of the leaders. They also know how to say no. Elite leaders know that saying no is just as important as saying yes. And whatever you say yes to means you're saying no to something else. So the demands on your time as you progress in a leadership career are only going to increase. The further up you go and the more responsibilities you have, the more demands you will have on your time. And if you can't effectively say no in a way that makes you feel good, then you're going to run the risk of overworking yourself and getting burned out and committing to too many things. So elite leaders know how to say no without saying no so that they feel really good. Elite leaders have a very clear understanding of what it is they are naturally talented to do. And they also know that if they will do work that is aligned with their natural strengths, then they will produce the highest level of output for themselves, their customers, their company, everybody. And they also know that their team has a set of unique talents, and they orchestrate these talents together to make the greatest output. This is why you have high-performing teams. Well, there's a difference. There's a clear difference between a high-performing team and an average team, right? In terms of performance, in terms of camaraderie, in terms of culture, everything. And it starts with elite leaders. Elite leaders also have incredible routines. I'm talking on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis. They know that consistency is key because they're playing the long-term game. They also have mastered their time. So they know how to take control of the single most important thing in their day, which is how they use their time to solve the biggest challenges and problems that are presented and that they foresee. Elite leaders are never a bottleneck. What I mean is that their team and their team's ability to run effectively and accomplish what they need to do is not dependent on the leader being present. They have built a different kind of machine than everybody else. They are not the center point of their team. They are merely the leader of the team. And so, therefore, they're not the bottleneck. And this is a big difference and something that is often overlooked when it comes to leadership, is being the one with all the answers. We'll get into more of that in just a little bit. So that's just some of the topics that I consider to be in the leading yourself pillar. And what that means is that all of those are 100% within your direct control as a leader. So if you want to become a lead, we need to focus on those areas and be able to execute them at an exceptionally high level. Think Navy SEALs and what they're able to execute versus what the rest of the people in the Navy are able to execute. Pillar number 2 is leading others. And this has to do with all the topics related to the work that you do as an elite leader with your team. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Number 1 is elite leaders build an inclusive team identity. They're not satisfied with just having a group of people that happen to work together, and if it was my group and my name is Nils, it's Nils's team. They're not satisfied with that level of identity. That is simply putting the leader at the top of the stack, and that's the exact opposite thing that they do. Right? Ultimately, what they're doing here is creating something that everybody, 1, is a part of, and 2, wants to be a part of. Because people don't get out of bed to do a bunch of tasks, or even to serve a manager most days. Right? They get up to follow a leader and to support what is an inclusive team identity that they had a hand in setting. And identity is one of the most powerful aspects of bringing a group of people together to transform how they perform. So to go from average to elite, an identity is a critical piece. Next up, elite leaders drive their team's performance. Back to what we talked about a little bit earlier with regards to the level of vagueness, they know that they have to set extremely clear expectations. They know they have to drive more accountability than everybody else, but they have to do it without being a micromanager, and they know how to do this. That's often the biggest concern with driving accountability that I hear on a regular basis is, I want to drive accountability, but I don't want to be perceived as a micromanager. I mean, these are adults. They said they were going to do what they were going to do. Isn't that good enough? The simple answer is no. Elite leaders drive accountability without being a micromanager. They know how to run effective meetings. Most meetings in the grand scheme of our professional world and that you participate in on a regular basis are a waste of time. I know you've sat in some meetings within the last couple days, if not the last week, and you've said, what is the point of me being here? Well, it all starts with the person who organized the meeting or the person who was invited that didn't have the ability or the tools to be able to call out what would be an ineffective use of time. Elite leaders don't play that game. They do not participate in meetings that are irrelevant, things that are not good uses of their time because they've mastered their time. They know exactly where it should be spent. Elite leaders don't have the answers. And this is a really interesting one. It's often counterintuitive, but the higher up you go, the fewer answers you should actually have. And while contrary, I've seen transformation again and again and again through the members of the B2B Leaders Academy, that when they use coaching skills to grow and develop their team and they stop having the answers, they start having real relationships. And they start seeing a tremendous difference in their team. They start seeing innovation in ways that they never thought were even possible. They start having better one-on-ones. They start having more deep conversations with their team about what's going on today, but also about their career and where they want to go. So elite leaders separate themselves from everybody when it comes to working with their teams and driving their team's performance. Pillar number 3 is called leading with communication. And this has to do with how you communicate your value and your team's value beyond your team. The vast majority of leaders out there, all the average, will only focus on doing the job and think that doing the job is enough. Elite leaders recognize that doing the job as a leader is not enough. And what they do is they effectively market their leadership, but they do it in a way where they're able to communicate effectively with anyone at any level. So if they're talking with a C-level executive, that's going to be a different conversation than they were talking with one of their peer leaders. Even if it was about the same topic, they know how to tweak and tune and adjust based on the level that the other person is at. And that is not just something that naturally comes to us. As people, as humans, we kind of fall victim to the crisis of context. We assume that because we know as much as we do about a particular topic, everybody else should too. But ultimately, that's not what is going to enable you to effectively communicate. If you follow that path and you never adjust your communication based on your audience, you're going to miss a significant number of opportunities in order to effectively communicate what it is that you want to share, whether it's something about you, your accomplishments, your team, your value. And so ultimately you'll be doing your team a disservice if you cannot effectively market your leadership and their results to the rest of the organization. So elite leaders know exactly how to do this. They have the tools, they have the frameworks in place, and they know how to effectively communicate anything to anyone at any level. When it comes to awareness of the value that elite leaders and their teams provide, every other leader in the organization knows exactly what the value is that they and their team deliver. There are no questions, and this is why elite leaders continuously get promoted. It is because they are the de facto choice, because everybody already knows what they're capable of. And when there's an opportunity for an additional growth or a new role or more responsibility, there's a select short list of people that are considered for those opportunities, and the elite leaders are always on that list. They do not have to go and fight and try to, wedge their way onto the list to be considered. They're already considered. And that's a fundamentally different way to approach your career growth than it is for the vast majority of the leaders that are out there. And again, that's another piece that separates the elite from everybody else. Our 4th pillar is leading with metrics. And we're going to take a look at how elite leaders use metrics to drive their personal and team performance. Now, elite leaders know how to measure anything, but they do not measure everything. And this is one of the most interesting areas that I've seen in the explosion of data in the world of SaaS, is that there is an endless amount of things to measure. There is data all over the place, every single day in every possible area. So the question is, what's actually really important to measure? Well, elite leaders know. They know how to use metrics to drive personal and team performance. So ultimately, what they're saying is, these are the select group of metrics that are really important. Everything else is irrelevant. Whereas the average leaders out there are saying, let's just track everything and then we'll figure it out later. You know what happens when you track everything and you figure it out later? You never actually figure it out because you never set up the strategy and the direction in the first place. But elite leaders do. The elite leaders never have team members left asking the question, how does what I do contribute to the company's goals? This is one of the most common ones. A million parody movies about the business environment have been made centered around this one topic. So the company reveals its goals, and everybody on the front line says, I have no clue how the work that I do on a day-to-day basis actually contributes to what our CEO just said is the goals of this company. I feel disconnected. I don't get it. I don't understand. Well, elite leaders know how to tie everything together. They know how to show the connection between the company level goals, ultimately what they're working on with their team, and how the activities of each individual team member actually directly contribute to the company's goals. This is not something that is going to be perfectly written out for you as a leader. This is something that you as an elite leader have to take control of and build the narrative around and take people through this process step by step. But once you do it once, you can do it any number of times. That's the best part. Elite leaders set accurate targets for their team each and every quarter. We all need targets to go. Targets are not just for sales teams. Targets are not just for, big high-level metrics. Targets exist across everything. They set a direction for what we want to achieve, and elite leaders know how to set accurate targets for their team and not introduce too much overwhelm. And elite leaders report the right metrics to the right people at the right time. Similar to our topic, what we talked about with communication and being able to communicate effectively with anybody at any level, the same applies to metrics. Oftentimes, again, as leaders, we can be so inundated with our day-to-day that we forget that the people we're sharing our metrics with actually have no context for what it is that we do. And if that's the case, your metrics will be ignored. And if there's a story behind them, it will not be heard. And if they're trying to be used to support an initiative or a request for headcount or anything, it will not be approved. So elite leaders know how to use the right metrics and report the right metrics, but they also know that the right metrics mean different things to different people at different times. And they're aware of their audience, and they're taking that into account as they build their presentations and ultimately are bringing everything together through the one thing everybody talks about and loves more than anything, which is data. Well, we've just covered what an elite leader is through the 4 pillars of leadership framework. Now, some of the things that I covered today you might think are common sense, but here's the thing about common sense. It's not so common. And becoming an elite leader doesn't happen in a vacuum. You need training content. You need a community of like-minded leaders. You need coaching to accelerate your progress. Look at the most successful people that you admire in any industry, sports category, business, etc., and you will find coaches behind them who are helping them to drive their progress. If your leadership development strategy is to, quote, figure it out as you go, you will always be average and you will never become elite. But if you want to become an elite leader, you need to invest in yourself. Just like the Navy SEALs who invest continuously training themselves to stay at the top of their game, you need to invest time, effort, money, and energy. My question for you is it worth it to you to become elite? Is what you want to achieve in 6, 12, and 18, and 24 months down the line worth it to invest in yourself, to invest the time, the effort, the money, the energy? If it is, then maybe I can help you. And I'd encourage you to get in touch with me at Nils, N-I-L-S, at B2B, letter B, number 2, letter B, leadersacademy.com. Send me an email. Tell me about your situation. Tell me you want to become elite. And I'll share with you details of how the B2B Leaders Academy transforms leaders into elite through the use of content, community, and coaching. So until next time, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in.